Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today with Maya Brown. My name is Nahal, and I'm part of the Student Success Team at Target Jobs. We're excited to be joined by representatives from Maya Brown, who will be sharing insights about the areas they work in. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please pop them into the Q&A function at the bottom right of the screen. Towards the end, the Maya Brown representatives will go through and answer your questions. For now, I'll hand it over to Kieran to kick things off.
Amazing, thank you. We're going to do some very quick introductions in just a second, but I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Bella, who will take us through the first slide.
Great, thank you, Kieran, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. This is our agenda for today, so I'll just rattle through it, but we're going to start with some introductions and talk a little bit about what our team here do at Maya Brown before we dive into the recruitment process overview, followed by some application tips and some insights into approaching the assessment centre, and then we'll finish off with a Q&A, and we've got two of our current trainees joining us as well. So meet the team. As I mentioned, my name's Bella. I am the Graduate Recruitment and Development Advisor in the team, and I'll hand over to Kieran to quickly introduce himself as well.
Thanks, Bella. So hi, everyone. As you can see, my name is Kieran Bennett. I'm the Graduate Recruitment and Development Coordinator here at Maya Brown. I've been here now for 3 years, transitioning over into the graduate recruitment space about 2 years ago. So this is actually my third or fourth cycle. So looking forward to just taking you guys through what the recruitment process actually looks like here at the firm, some tips and best practices for when you're approaching this, because we can fully appreciate it is a bit of a minefield if this is the first time going through one of these processes. I'll just hand back to Bella to finish her slides.
Great, thanks, Kieran. And so a little bit about what we do at Maya Brown in our graduate recruitment and development team. We look after both sides, so the recruitment and the development. As you can see up on the screen, the recruitment side of things involves pretty much everything end to end. So from the assessment and selection process, that's screening all the applications and the attraction activities, so running events, skills workshops like this one, and various open days, through to the mentoring schemes that we run, DE&I initiatives, as well as managing all the brand marketing and social media exercises that we do. And then once our trainees or solicitor apprentices are in-house, we also look after their development for the duration of their training contracts or the programs that they're on. So that involves everything from induction to seat allocation. We run career development meetings with all of our trainees and apprentices at about the 6 to 8 week mark of each seat that they do. We also manage the qualification process. We run discussion forums with our trainees and apprentices, and we tend to have our graduate partner and our training principal join those discussions as well. And then, of course, we provide the pastoral support. So we're pretty much the go-to HR person at the firm for all of our trainees and our apprentices, and then where things need to be handed over to specialised teams like the learning and development team or say the benefits team, we manage that as well. So we do quite a lot between a very lean team. There's 3 of us, myself, Kieran, and our manager. But with that introduction closed off, we will jump straight into the recruitment processes.
Thanks, Bella. So we're going to talk through the recruitment processes, but very beforehand, I just want to clarify for everyone, here at the firm, we have 2 distinct routes for our graduates, but we also have a third, which is aimed at the more junior end. Some of you may be familiar with something called a solicitor apprenticeship. It does have a very similar recruitment process to this, and we'd be welcome to take any questions anyone may have on those. But the main focus of today's talk is to talk around the graduate route to gaining a training contract with the firm. Both of those being the vacation scheme, which is our primary route to being awarded a training contract here at the firm, and also our direct training contract, which is still a very viable option to go down, but it is just a slightly smaller offering that we usually see. That does tend to change from time to time depending on the caliber of candidates coming through, but the primary route to obtaining a training contract with the firm is going by the vacation scheme route. But regardless of which one you choose, the recruitment process looks almost identical, but we'll also talk around today in today's session around where that might differ for all of you. As you can see from this slide up, this recruitment process, regardless of the two routes, has 4 stages, or 3 stages, but there's 4 elements to it. The first stage, and we will talk around best practice and tips for how to approach all of these over the coming slides. But the first stage of the recruitment process here at the firm is actually your online application form. That in conjunction with your online assessments, which you can see there is the second box listed, is essentially what forms the first stage of the application recruitment process here at the firm. If successful at passing both of these, you would then move on to stage 2, which is the life as a trainee simulation exercise. And what that really is it's a online platform which is a combination of pre-recorded questions. So what that means is you'll be presented with a scenario or question, and it's asking you how would you react, how would you deal with those. You would then need to prepare your answer and record yourself giving it. Alongside those, you can expect to be presented with written based assessments. So this could be something in the type of creating a summary, understanding large sets of data, analyzing it and condensing it down so it's easier for someone to read. We'll talk around what we're looking for there and how to approach that later on, as well as going in depth on what an assessment centre may look like here at the firm, which is the final step in securing your place for a vacation scheme. Whereas if you are a direct training contract applicant, this is the final stage before either being awarded a training contract or, unfortunately, this one just not being your time. So, mentioned here around the 2 different routes. This slide in particular is looking at the assessment centre and just kind of talking around what you can expect to be seeing and experiencing when doing an assessment centre here at the firm. As you can see with the vacation scheme, you will be completing a written assessment, which those tend to be the standard. You can expect there to be some element of grammar, spell checking, your written communication, which is a really key skill for any practicing aspiring solicitor. As every day you're dealing with drafting, you're looking at contracts, so you need to be able to demonstrate that clear communication understanding, as well as 2 other exercises, which is a group exercise, which again we'll talk about, but that is pretty much what it says on the tin of you'll be presented with a scenario, a case study, whatever that may be, and you'll be working with other candidates throughout the day to complete this. The fact find is slightly different in the sense that you won't find it as much out in the market if you do complete assessment centres at other firms. We do find it's quite bespoke to ourselves. And this exercise we actually find a lot of people enjoy, which is essentially it's you gathering the information that you need from an assessor to be able to then complete the task, which sounds slightly cryptic, but we will talk around what that actually is later on in the slides. Here, though, you can see if you look at the direct training contract, pretty much everything you're doing at the vacation scheme is the same. The only differing element, which I kind of mentioned earlier on, was that you would complete a training contract interview the same day as the assessment centre. The reason for this being is as there is no further steps in the direct training contract route, you're not going on to secure a place at a vacation scheme. You would sit that, which is alongside being interviewed by 2 fee earners. Typically they are partners, or at least a minimum of a partner and perhaps a senior associate counsel. And you'd sit that the same day, and then that in conjunction with your performances across different assessments would be the basis of if you're awarded a training contract or not. You can see that on the vacation scheme though, that we do highlight once you complete the assessment centre and you move on, successfully securing that place, what determines the outcome of being awarded a training contract is your performance across the 2-week scheme, and then also sitting a training contract interview. The reason you sit it on the scheme is that it makes more sense for it to be on the scheme as opposed to beforehand. Otherwise, it adds too much stress for the candidates, and we don't want to be doing that. We fully appreciate this process is already stressful enough for you all. Hand on to Bella, who's going to talk around some application tips, which I will also help out with.
Great, thanks very much, Kieran. So jumping into the application form. So as it says up on the screen, we just take really CV data at this point. So we're asking for your personal details, academic history, work experience, extracurricular, hobbies and wider achievements, and then languages if that's applicable to you. And it's important to note here as well, we're not just looking for legal work experience. We are fully appreciative of how competitive and how difficult it can be to get legal work experience in the City of London and at your stage. So we like to as well to see all your work experience that you've done, wherever that may be. We also take into account mitigating circumstances. So there's a spot on the application form for you to include that information too. And we also operate on a blind CV approach. So that means that only members of the graduate recruitment team, myself and Kieran, are going to see this level of detail once, if you're successful in progressing through. The people or the internal people that you engage with at the firm will only have your name and whether you're a law or a non-law student. On to the online assessments. So we have the situational strength test, which assesses your judgment in professional situations. It's a multiple choice test and it's untimed. And then there is the VRT, the verbal reasoning test. So this is testing your comprehension, reasoning, interpretation, adaptability, and dexterity. This part is time assessed. And it's testing your written ability and proofreading skills. But I'll let Kieran talk a little bit more about each of those as well.
Thanks, Bella. So one thing that's important to know is part of your application, there is spaces for you to be telling us around mitigating circumstances and reasonable adjustments. We fully appreciate that individuals may have learning difficulties, they may need more accessibility or alternatives. So we do encourage, when applying to the firm, to disclose that. The sooner that we know about this, the sooner that we can work with the individuals to make sure that we're putting in place the right adjustments so that people are being assessed fairly. So we do ask in that space just to let us know. And similarly with on the application where there is the space for your academics, there is also another part for mitigating circumstances. Fully appreciate it has been a difficult couple of years. There was COVID that has affected a lot of people's studies, time at universities, which may have adversely affected their grade, or there could be anything else going on in a person's life. So we do ask to give us that full picture and understanding so that we can take that into account when reviewing the online tests and the application. We like to take that holistic approach to looking at things. In terms of the SST and the verbal reasoning test, this testing thankfully isn't the Watson-Glaser, which some of you may be familiar with, so hopefully that helps to put some people's minds at ease. One thing to note is that when we do send out the invite to complete these tests, everyone will receive them. There could be a potential delay, so if you have already applied to us or planning to apply to us, they may not be automatically assigned straight away. Reason being for this is it's an incredibly manual system, meaning someone does need to dial into the system. So don't be alarmed if you do not receive them straight away, you will receive them. The thing with this, we will also send out practice test links. So the provider that we use is an organization called Capfinity. So you can always access their site. We send the practice links so that you can have a bit of experience prior to then completing the actual tests. The important thing noting here is that once testing has been assigned, you'll be emailed from us confirming the assignment of the tests. You'll then have 7 days to complete this. Unless we're informed whilst the testing is ongoing that there is a reason, perhaps you access testing, it isn't working, the internet or in your house isn't working, anything like that, we need to know within those 7 days, because then we can go in and adjust the settings. Anything after, unfortunately, we may not be in a position where we are able to go in and reassign or adjust the testing. So the sooner that we know, the sooner the better. If you want to go on to the next one, Bella.
Great, thank you, Kieran. And so if you meet also pass the minimum criteria for the situational strength and the verbal reasoning test, you'll then be progressed through to the Life as a Trainee simulation exercise. So this component of the assessment is tailored to Mayor Brown, and it consists of a combination of multiple choice written and video responses. It's important to note at this point there's quite a substantial amount of material for you to review, so we'd really encourage you to undertake this simulation exercise when you've got the right time and space to do so. It's certainly not something that should be rushed by all means. This component of the assessment is testing your alignment to a career in commercial law and your motivations for working at Mayor Brown. So it's really the first opportunity for you to talk about why Mayor Brown, and that's something that we really look to listen out for during this component. So we'd say really to try and demonstrate your ability to think on your feet, be confident in your abilities, and we're looking for, yeah, like I said, your career motivations and the real drives for why Mayor Brown and why a career in commercial law.
Just adding to Bella's understanding of the Life is Trainee simulation, some of the other things that you should be mindful of, as Bella said, is that when completing this step, this isn't something that you'll be wanting to do on the go. You should make sure you're putting that time aside. We always advise that it can take 45 minutes on average. That isn't a confirmation of, if you finish it within 30 minutes, it's an indicator of how you've done. If you take longer than 45 minutes, it's not an indicator. It's just on average. That's what we say that you should put to one side to complete this exercise. The exercise timings is that you will have 2 minutes to prep your answers. So again, whatever the scenario question is that you're presented with, you'll have 2 minutes to prepare, think it through, and then it will move on to asking you to record. A key thing here is that you only have 2 minutes to record your answer. Anything that is said after those 2 minutes, we will not receive, we do not get to see. So it's important to note that when delivering it, that you're clear, concise, and to the point. Is, again, you have 2 minutes. You don't have to use the full amount. It's not an indicator. But the last thing you want to do is be setting up an amazing answer. And then the key things that we need to be able to really understand either your understanding of the question, the firm, or whatever the scenario is to be delivered at the 2 minute, 5 second mark, because then unfortunately we do not receive it. So be mindful of that. And also, as it says there, this is taking the place of a video interview with a member of the firm. The firm, as in a member of the graduate recruitment team, will view your responses. This isn't something being marked by AI or someone external like a third party. We will see it. So it's your real first introduction to us of who you are. So be mindful of what you're wearing, attire, be mindful of your background, be mindful of how you want to be coming across in this video interview, because as we say, it's taking the place of a interview. So act as if there is another person on the other end, because we will see everything, which isn't to say, we expect everyone to be suited and booted and best dressed, but it's just to be mindful that you want to be putting forward that professional self and really making the impact that you want for us to see. The other thing as well is, again, if you do have any reasonable adjustments, anything like this at all, it's important that we're informed ahead of time so that we can make sure that either the right adjustments are applied to the testing, or we can talk through any other adjustments that perhaps could be put in place to help best support our applicants going through this. And really, just another top tip for this assessment is this is your key stage to really let us know what you understand around Mayor Brown. Is do the research and make sure you're getting that across in your responses, that you understand perhaps what our practice group offerings are, that you understand the firm's position in the market. All these small things, as I've said, is your first time really to show us who you are and that understanding. So you want to make sure you're getting that all across to be really successful at this assessment. The next bit is, as when we were talking through the recruitment process in a nutshell earlier, we're going to just break down what is meant by the assessment center and have a look through what those particular exercises actually are. So the assessment center, regardless of if it's a vacation scheme or training contract direct, you're guaranteed to complete these 3 elements standard across the day. Typically, an assessment center lasts, I believe it's 3.5 hours. So we call it an assessment center day, but realistically, it's either a morning or an afternoon. So hopefully, not too much on our candidate's part. The written assessment, as I spoke through earlier, is going to be a combination of assessing the written language, being able to take large samples of data, break them down, and put them into a format, either like a summary, a letter, an email, something like that is what you can be expecting to understand here. A really important thing, or a top tip, is think about the style, the format. How are you addressing this? Is it professional? Is it too informal? Think about how you want to be sending that as a trainee or a member of this firm. The fact find. This is the exercise that we said is a little bit bespoke to Mayor Brown. We're quite fond of it here. It's almost like a role-playing exercise where you'll be presented with a scenario where you have no information other than, excuse me, you'll be asked to decide either between 2 companies or to answer a certain question, make a recommendation, something like that, but you'll have none of that info. The only way to get that is by asking your assessor questions, because they will have the answers. It's all about your way of thinking, your understanding of what the business is, or key factors that should be considered important when undertaking new clients or considering potential legal issues when looking at clients. So a key word here, which is such a buzzword at the moment, commercial awareness. That's something you can really expect us to be assessing here. And then the group exercise, whilst I can't give you the exact, this is what it's going to be, this will similarly be an exercise where, once again, you're presented with that scenario, that situation, and you need to come up with an answer or recommendation. And then that is working alongside the other candidates of the assessment center. So I'm sure you can guess some of those skills that we're looking at. So thinking around collaboration, your ability to work with others, coming up with pragmatic solutions, but also bringing in that commercial awareness, the understanding of who Mayor Brown is. Those are things that are being assessed here. Each exercise lasts roughly about 45 minutes each, and the only addition to this is obviously if you are doing a direct training contract application and you make it through to the assessment center, you'll also sit the interview the same day. Interview, regardless of the opportunity you're going for, will be 2 fee earners, usually 2 partners, but potentially a partner and counsel, partner and senior associate. And the format is a strength-based interview. For anyone who's unfamiliar with that term, a strength-based interview is designed to test your potential. The reason that we do this as opposed to a competency-based interview, where it's assessing you based on previous experience, the strength-based allows us to understand, is this something that you could potentially have a real strength in doing? Do you understand the skills that we're looking for? It gives a fairer assessment of a candidate, because as we can all appreciate, no one applying for a trainee role is a trainee, so it's unfair to judge them by those standards. Then what are we looking for? These skills, I won't read them all out because I'm sure that you can all see this, but some of the real key things here that we've identified is having that drive to want this career. This is a long career if you do it correctly, not just a 2-year training contract, but this is, especially from Mayor Brown's perspective, we're investing in the future partners of the law firm. As we've seen, we have members of the firm here, even our training principal, Miriam Bruce. She was a trainee here 20 years ago, and now she's a training principal. So that it's just a testament to, we want to see that drive in our future trainees to be the partners of the future for the firm. Resilience goes hand in hand. It's a long old career if you do it correctly. So being able to demonstrate that throughout the assessment centers and different activities, whether that's, being able to keep with it for the day, defend your point, be able to if working in groups where perhaps there's louder personalities, still being able to make contributions. Resilience can show itself in many different formats, so it doesn't always have to be that being combative or being able to defend. Sometimes it's just keeping going and having that resilience to keep pushing forward. A big one, business acumen, goes hand in hand with the commercial awareness skill. Those are ever changing, but they're so important for trainees and solicitors, regardless of what stage of career you're at. You'll be hearing from some of our trainees where they'll be able to talk around how they develop commercial awareness during the assessment process, but also how it continues to develop as a trainee in their roles, so that hopefully you can recognize some of these skills from our trainees today and maybe ask those questions of how they've managed to display them. Then tips again, these are there, and there's nothing here that's too groundbreaking for you. I think if you speak with any recruiters, they always recommend the same thing, but we cannot stress enough around doing that research point. It needs to be more than the opening paragraph on the firm's website. We received so many applications that I cannot tell you how many times I read the same thing of either 26 offices, 3 financial hubs, or large presence. The best way to go about this is understanding what it is that you want from your training contract and then tailoring your answers around that. So is it that perhaps you want to be part of a smaller cohort where you get greater experience and exposure with clients where perhaps you may have more responsibility? That's something that Mayor Brown can offer you that perhaps isn't on the website, that then helps to make those responses more developed. So they're not just reading from the website, but they also become more authentic to what you hold as values and what you want for your training contract, which help to stand out to people both when reviewing your application, but also when moving on to those later stage assessments, because it's helping to make those responses authentic, more believable, and they resonate more with the people who will be interviewing and assessing you. Making sure it's tailored as well is, if when doing an application or providing a response, the phrase that we use is, if you can take our firm name out, so remove Mayor Brown and put any of either our competitors in there or any other law firm within London, and it still reads roughly the same, then that's a sign that the application, the answer isn't developed enough. And unfortunately, that with the competition that we're seeing these days, it just won't be able to go much further. So really making sure that you're providing enough detail, but also in what that alludes to as tailoring your interview questions, is a lot of the time when doing interviews, we can see that candidates answer the question they wish they'd been asked as opposed to what was asked. So making sure that you're understanding what's being asked of you, using relevant examples, and providing those detailed responses. But I'll quickly hand over to Bella just in case she had any tips that she wanted to elaborate on or any extra things she wanted to say.
Thanks, Kieran. I think you covered everything very nicely there. The last page that I've got here is just to cover a couple of resources. LinkedIn, the firm website, social media, listening to podcasts, all these different bullet points, media touch points, they're ways, including, like I said, being on this call today, but ways for you to really dig a little bit deeper and get a better understanding of the firm and why Mayor Brown and why Mayor Brown is you, because at the end of the day, that's what we want to hear. We want to hear your drive, your commitment to a long career in commercial law, but why Mayor Brown is really, really important. So I think that covers our sort of graduate recruitment and development presentation. Did we have time for a couple of questions? I can see some have come through the chat before our trainees join us. There's a question here, do you view volunteering as work experience or as part of the extracurriculars? And absolutely we do. So something that we see really important is where you can talk about your previous experiences and pull out the transferable skills. So, in volunteering, where you're working with people and engaging with different people from different backgrounds, that's absolutely an experience that you can speak to, and how you can bring, that experience into making you, a really strong trainee. Another on a rolling basis.
Yeah, happy to answer that one. In a nutshell, yes, we do recruit on a rolling basis for all opportunities: Vaccine Direct TC's London Open Day, the Mayor Brown LGBT Open Day, and the Sister Apprenticeship. However, what that also means is that the sooner that you apply, the more likely that you could end up sitting an earlier assessment centre. So we do encourage that people apply as soon as they can and as soon as they feel ready, because if for whatever reason, if you were to apply on the very last day, 16th of December, if you're going for the vacation scheme, if you applied on 16th December, we would still review the application. However, there is a chance that if all spaces have been filled because we've completed earlier assessment centres, then we wouldn't be able to progress that application much further, purely because we don't have the spaces available. So again, we do say, please do apply as soon as possible for you.
Okay, wonderful. We'll see how we go for time, and if we do have time at the end, we can continue to pick up the more graduate recruitment focused questions. But for now, I will introduce you to two of our trainees, Alex Bicknell-Cummins and William Madison. I can see they're on the call, but we might just need GTI to bring them onto the stage. Great, thank you. Perhaps if I start over to Alex to introduce herself and then hand over to Will.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a second seat trainee. So I joined the firm just over 6 months ago. Yeah, I'm in construction litigation at the minute.
Hi, pardon me. Hi, I'm Will. I joined the firm just over a year ago, and I'm in my third seat at the moment doing finance.
Thank you both. I'm just going to head over to the questions section. If everyone would like to start popping their questions in that questions chat function. So the first question here, what advice would you give to candidates who are part of the group exercises where one person is trying to dominate the entire conversation? Alex or Will, do you have any insights?
I can start with that one. Yeah, I think that one's quite a difficult one, because obviously sometimes, and especially I remember when I did my assessment centre, we did it over Teams because it was during COVID. So it was really difficult because either someone was maybe dominating the conversation because somebody might have been on mute by accident, or it was just quite difficult to interject. But I think in that situation, I think, obviously you don't want to sort of interrupt someone mid-flow, but you do obviously want to give the best version of yourself. So if there are sort of natural pauses in when someone is trying to dominate the conversation, and you can interject, or maybe even suggest, oh, that's a good idea, does anybody else have any other thoughts on whatever the particular question is? I think number one, that just shows, that you're willing to listen to other people. And number two, it shows that you're not afraid to also make yourself heard in those situations. And I appreciate it can be really, really difficult when someone's just going on and on and on. I'm sure, when people are in a call with me or a chat with me, I have, not unfortunately, but I have a habit of sometimes just going on a bit. But I think sometimes what you've got to remember is no one's going to sort of think, wow, you're being rude for interjecting. Ultimately, you're in that situation as well. You want to do as well as you can, and you want to make yourself heard. So, try and be polite when you do interject or interrupt, whatever you want to call it, but do obviously make yourself heard and get your points across, because you want to give the best account of yourself on the day. I don't know what you think about that, Alex, but I think that's probably like the best approach, or how I might take that, sort of deal with that situation.
Yeah, I'd say probably be careful as well not to then become the person who dominates the conversation. You can probably have an urge to try and, if one person's doing that, to try and take over or start to lead it, but be aware of the fact that, it's not your job to control the situation. Like, that's being reviewed by Grad Rec. So, make sure that you're still coming across in the best way, even if someone is quite frustrating. Remain neutral in that situation.
Thanks both. There is a question here that's come up around motivations. So I guess it would be helpful, maybe if we start with you, Will, around what were your motivations, other than, wanting a training contract, to applying to Mayor Brown?
Yeah, so I think for me, I paralegaled before I joined Mayor Brown, and I paralegaled I was a finance paralegal and a corporate paralegal. And obviously Mayor Brown's got a very prominent finance practice and also a very prominent corporate practice. So I think one of the motivations for me applying to Mayor Brown for the work sense was I knew I enjoyed finance, I knew I enjoyed corporate, and Mayor Brown was good at both of those areas. So that was definitely a motivation for applying, because it meant that when I did do my application, I think my interests could shine through. I mean, not to say that intellectual property isn't an interesting topic, but at the time when I was applying, it's not something I'd ever done before. I didn't do law at university, so it wasn't something I'd ever really come across. So, was there any point, but if I applied to a law firm with a very big and prominent IP practice, I think I would have been at a disadvantage, because number one, I didn't know anything about IP, and I wasn't that interested in it. So I think the fact that I was interested in two of the big practice areas that Mayor Brown has really helped. And I think secondly, there's quite a small trainee intake at Mayor Brown. So I think there's it's split over. So I started 6 months before Alex, but we're in the same cohort. So 10 of us started, and then I think it was 5 of us started. But the fact that it was a small cohort was another sort of motivation for me, because I did want quite a lot of responsibility when I was on the training contract. Not to say that other law firms wouldn't give you that, but if you're one of 100, number one, it's quite difficult to stand out. And number two, because there's so many trainees, the work might not be, the work might be spread out a bit more, and you might be sort of doing a little bit more of the ancillary tasks rather than maybe, liaising with clients or drafting key documents. So I think the smaller trainee intake definitely was something that attracted me to the firm, because, and just my final point is that obviously it's a small trainee cohort, but it's not so small that you don't feel like you can rely on your other trainees. So I think it's the perfect size where you can rely on other people in your team. So I'm in finance at the moment, and there are 6 trainees who I know them all. I can rely on them. You can sort of lean on each other, but there's not so many that you feel like the work's being divvied out and you're not really doing anything, or rather, you're not doing sort of the more exciting work that you might want to.
Yeah, I would agree with everything Will said. With the small cohort, that really appealed to me as well. I feel like I did work in deals. I used to be in finance, and you work on deals really often, which is just you and a partner. So you have a lot of responsibility, you have a lot of learning opportunities, you're really involved. And I like that compared to maybe other firms where you're doing more ancillary tasks, as Will said. I'd also say the culture really appealed to me. You are worked hard, but people are really grateful for the work you do. People are really invested in you and your growth and your future opportunities. I feel like people kind of check in, they want to know what you're interested in. They kind of have an interest in your career as opposed to just being there to churn out work for them. So I really liked that. And the work that we do as well. I kind of looked on the website, I did research, and the kind of deals, kind of clients that the firm had, I thought were really interesting.
Great, thank you both. There's a question here about gaining commercial awareness. So what is the best way of achieving this knowledge, or what did both of you do in the lead up and throughout your recruitment processes to gain commercial awareness? If we start with Will, perhaps.
Yeah, so I think I was a bit boring anyway. I used to read like the news every morning when I wake up, so I had a Times subscription, and on my way to work I'd read the Times. Or yeah, I mean, I'm a bit of I was about to say news junkie, but that's a bit of the thing. I do read the news, I follow the news, and I was very fortunate. I had access to a Times subscription where you're not just reading about world news, but there's a business section, there's a specific legal section. So things like that, where I was looking at that, oh, that's quite interesting. How would this how could I deploy this knowledge in an application? Would it be relevant? Why would it be relevant, etc. And also, I think there are obviously lots of other sort of specifically legal news publications anyway, which are sort of free for all. So I think Legal Cheek's a really good example. They always sort of every day they have sort of their top 5 news stories of what's going on in law. And I think if you keep abreast of what things like that, you are much more commercially aware. But I do think it's just really important, and being aware on sort of what's going on in the world, being aware of what business trends there are, etc. And I think the only way to do that is to sort of either go and seek it, or if you already have a pre-existing interest, just like maintaining that every day. Because I think it was definitely something that helped me when I was applying, just because I wasn't starting from scratch. I did have a bit of a base knowledge. I was fortunate enough that I had access to subscriptions, but I knew where to look. And I think ultimately you've got to go out and do your own legal research before applying to a law firm. And I suppose finally as well, I mean, Mayer Brown do publish sort of details of deals they've been involved. They'll publish articles about things that certain departments might view as quite important, or sort of current trends in the legal market. So if you're going to apply to Mayer Brown or any other law firm, it's always worth looking at their website and seeing what they're talking about, because that's probably a good indicator of what's important in the legal space at that given time.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. I would say on a subscription point, I think a lot of universities offer subscriptions. I think that's how I got mine. It was just through my university. I'd say podcasts are really useful as well, because often they have way more discussion and more back and forth. And I think that's really important when it comes to commercial awareness, is being able to not criticize, but question and form your own judgments about things that are going on. I think that's really useful going into law as well. So I think, yeah, look for different opinions, look for, 2 articles that might have opposing views, and then form your own opinion. That would be really useful when it comes to commercial awareness. And I think, yeah, as well as just reading around topics, it's remembering and viewing it all through the lens of a business, including a law firm, which is obviously at the end of the day a business. It's making sure that you're thinking of it in that way, as opposed to just a abstract story.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Will. So there's a question here around the dynamic at the firm, which I think also touches on, the investment into the trainees. So are you able to talk around the investment, we'll call it, or the responsibility get as trainees? And also, is there any initiatives or opportunities where you get to develop those skills or build your own confidence, whether that be through pro bono, if there's any initiatives where you get to meet with clients? Alex, I might come to you first on this one, if that's all right.
Yeah, so say with initiatives, I'm part of the women's committee, and talking of initiative, I took my own initiative to try and join that committee. I went and spoke to the other members. I gave my suggestions and ideas, and that was really encouraged. With pro bono as well, there are always different pro bono opportunities being offered. There is a pro bono team here who you can go and reach out to individually, or partners and associates might ask for help, and so it's really easy to get involved, depending on how much work you've got on otherwise. And again, it's really encouraged. You get like awards if you reach certain hours of pro bono, which is a nice way to motivate people to get involved with such opportunities. There's loads of charity events as well. We sponsor a number of local charities. So yeah, it's really easy to get involved with them. I know last week, I think there was a netball and a football match that was held for charity, and they ended up raising, I don't want to say how much, few grand was raised for a local charity that we sponsor. So those things, it's hard not to get involved, and it's really encouraged, which is really lovely.
Will, same question?
To be honest, I don't really have much more to add to what Alex has said. I think she's basically covered it. There's loads of things going on at the firm, and ultimately it's up to you as a trainee as to whether or not you want to get involved or whether you don't. I mean, just sort of touching on one of the pro bono initiatives, we sort of work with a local legal clinic. One of the former trainees who's just qualified used to run it, and sort of every week there are a number of slots to sort of help on a pro bono matter, and essentially you can put your hand up as and when you have the capacity to do so. So that's sort of, and that's specifically I think that's specifically directed at trainees. Actually, I'm not sure whether or not that's something that I don't know, but I know that when it goes around, it's sort of first come first serve, as it were, to trainees who want to put their hand up for pro bono initiatives like that. So yeah, I think Alex covered it all there. That was a great answer.
Thank you both. And there's a couple of questions in the chat around, I guess there's two sides to this, but why a career in commercial law, and then why Mayer Brown, and what stood out to you about Mayer Brown when you were putting out applications? So perhaps if we start with Will for this one.
Yeah, so I think I sort of covered this a little bit as to what what encouraged me to apply to Mayer Brown, but sort of the practice areas that Mayer Brown's very prominent in. So as I said, the corporate practice, the banking and finance practice was something that definitely drew my attention, and I think also the small trainee intake, again, as I said, for the reasons I gave before. Sorry, could you just repeat the question? What was the second part of it?
No, that's okay. There was why a career in commercial law,
Okay.
and then the why Mayer Brown.
Yeah, I suppose why commercial law. First of all, I think it's sort of the longevity of the career really appealed to me. I think it's not, if you become a lawyer, you're a lawyer for life. So it's always something that it's always going to be a string to your bow. You're always going to be a solicitor, and I thought that was something that really appealed to me. It was something where, of course, you can move around different law firms, depending on what goes on in your career, but you can start your career at 22 and you can finish your career as a lawyer at 55, but you're going to be a lawyer past that. So I think the longevity of the career, I mean, the other thing is I just thought it was quite a secure profession. I mean, you're always going to need lawyers, fingers crossed. So that was something that definitely appealed to me as well. And I think sort of finally, and I hope this doesn't put people off, but it is a challenging career. And I mean, I think Alex picked up on it. She said, we do work hard here, and I don't think anybody applying should be under any illusion that you aren't going to work hard if you're a lawyer, especially if you're a lawyer at Mayer Brown. But I think that that was one of the reasons why I was drawn to the career, because it is challenging, but that's exciting and it's interesting because you're always doing new things, and sort of transactions are always changing and will continue to change. So you're going to constantly be developing yourself as a lawyer throughout your career. And I think it would just be boring if you came in and you did the same thing over and over again and there was no change. Or for me, it would be boring. So don't get me wrong, it can be really scary when someone gives you something and you're thinking, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to do this, or I don't even know where to start. But it's really exciting because when you do sort of take a breath and you look at it and you think, actually, I think this is what I've got to do. I think I've got to look at this. I've got to look at that. You do a piece of work, you send it off for review, and you come back and you've done really well. You do feel great afterwards. It does give you a bit of a buzz. So I think the sort of challenging nature of the work for me was something that I knew was always going to keep me interested and keep me excited. So that's why I thought commercial law would be a good career.
Yeah, I would really agree with all of that. I'd say it's kind of the job that grows with you as well. Like you're never not being challenged, never not learning. Like you might be a really senior partner and you're still coming across things you've never done before. And I liked that you will never fully sort of master the career. Like you're always learning. Yeah, and I'd say I can probably answer more on the what I Mayor Brown side of that question. It's a place that really encourages that, I'd say. It really pushes you, but in a good way. And like that's based off all the things we've discussed earlier with, small cohort sizes and high expectations and good quality of work. But yeah, the quality of work really appealed, the type of culture, all of the other extracurriculars that we've discussed today. The people, I know everyone always talks about that here, but it makes such a difference. And you speak to people at other places and you kind of realize how when when you are working hard, how much of a difference that makes to you. It's an environment you want to be in and you want to excel in.
Thanks both. Oh, sorry, my voice went there. Very quickly, we will move on to a question that I've seen around a typical day in banking and finance and corporate. But I did very quickly just want to answer the question that has popped up around best times to apply for summer vacations. And on that, I will also throw on spring vacation schemes. The firm is currently open, so from 1st September, you can submit your applications. The deadline for both, regardless if it's spring or summer, is the 16th of December 2024. The application needs to be in and made by then. Anything after that date, you won't be able to apply. So make sure it's in by 16th of December 2024 to be considered. Back to the other question though, is you've both now had a range. So Will, you've done corporate, you've done finance. Alex, similarly, you've done finance, but I also know that you paralegaled before in our corporate practice. What are some of those typical day-to-day tasks, responsibilities you've been exposed to so far? Or if you wanted, what does a typical day look like? Will, I'll come to you first, and then we'll come to you, Alex.
Yeah, so I mean, part of the reasons why it is an interesting job is not every day is the same. As I mentioned, it does very, very much vary day to day. And as Kieran said, it can be very different from seat to seat. So for example, I just did a seat in construction litigation, which is very different to my sort of what my day would look like in either finance or corporate. But sort of as a typical day in a transactional seat for me, obviously I wake up and I come into the office, unless it's a Monday. But yeah, come into the office, sort of review my emails. I might have, for example, put what I tend to do in this just for my day is the day before, the night before, as I'm leaving the office, I'll always sort of have a to-do list for things I know I have to do tomorrow. So I'll come in, I'll review my emails and then look at my to-do list. So for example, someone emailed me the night before saying, can you review this? I'll sort of start off with things like that. But, typical tasks that you could do in a corporate or finance seat, I suppose if you're on a transaction, updating and reviewing a CP checklist or updating and reviewing a documents list. So for those of you, I'll give a very brief, but let's take a documents list, for example. It's just all the documents that are required to be drafted and signed for a transaction. As a trainee, it's your responsibility to monitor all the status of these documents, sort of when they've been updated, reflect this in a list and circulate it to the relevant lawyers or the partner on a deal. So I would say that in a transactional seat in particular, that's definitely something that you might be doing day to day. Drafting documents, so for example, drafting corporate authorizations, that might be drafting a director's certificate in a finance transaction or a set of shareholders resolutions in a corporate transaction. So as I said before, you're not just sort of doing ancillary tasks, you're involved in the drafting, you're involved in the overall management of a transaction. I think day to day as well, you'll be talking to various fee earners in the team. So if you're on a deal, there might be a call that's scheduled with sort of lawyers from the other side or the client. So that might involve drafting a call note. I think that's very common, particularly when I did my litigation seat. It's really important that we have all the sets of facts in a potential dispute. So drafting call notes was something that I did very regularly. And yeah, I think I'll hand over to Alex at that point, just because those are the only things that I can think of off the top of my head right now that are things that you would tend to do every day. I don't know if you've got any others, Alex, but
Yeah, there'll be quite a few like ad hoc tasks, especially in the corporate and finance teams. Um, so that could be like proofreading, it could be checking documents, it could be verifying information. Um, those teams have a bit less legal research, but you might be doing research on companies themselves. So sort of reviewing companies' house, reviewing articles, working out how a company works in like a practical legal sense, so that you then know how to draft documents and carry out a transaction. Um, I would say there's attending a lot of meetings, and especially Teams calls, taking notes, sort of debriefing on them. You're expected to know exactly what's going on at every moment. You kind of have to keep track of that. So there's a lot of emails to be read and kept on top of. As you get a bit more experience, there'll be way more drafting of documents. There'll be a lot of precedents to be monitoring, and using those as a base for your work. I'm trying to think what else. All blurs into one.
Thanks both. We are coming now into the final few minutes of our presentation today. So I've just done one question that came in around international students as trainees. Yes, we do take international students. Just be mindful when applying for whichever opportunity that you meet the requirements for that opportunity. If there is if you're an international student currently studying abroad, or if you have a visa or anything like that, just be mindful to check those alongside the dates for vacation schemes, or there is a direct training contract which will help to alleviate most of those concerns. I would say just do the research on those. And I also appreciate we haven't managed to get to all of the questions today. There are some that I can see have a bit of a nuance with, so we're more than happy to pick those up if you wanted to follow up at grecruitment@mayorbrown.com. That will come through to either myself or Bella, where we'll be happy to pick up any queries that we haven't been able to get to for you. But using the last 2-3 minutes here for Alex, well, it might be helpful if you guys wanted to take maybe a minute each. Alex, we'll come to you first. If there's any advice that you could give to yourself going back to when you were doing your applications that you think is important to share with future applicants of the firm.
Ooh, that's a good question. I would probably tell myself probably to be a bit more confident and believe in myself a bit more. Like I think I doubted my own knowledge quite a lot, or my own experience. I would say to remember that the firm at the end of the day is a business. We are all here to make money for the firm. The firm is here to be profitable. And we should consider the work that happens through that lens. I would also say, remember that we're a people business and we are here to give a really good service to our clients. And I think that frames most of the work that we do. It's all about, giving really good advice, being clear, being succinct, being good people. You got to be sociable and nice, and you could be the smartest person ever, but if you're not a nice person, no one's going to want to work with you. The client isn't going to be interested in you. So it's being well-rounded. Probably my tips to myself.
Amazing. Thanks, Alex. And Will, same question.
Yeah, I think pretty similar. I think number one, I'd sort of say just sort of to relax and to not be sort of so, not to be so concerned about what everybody else is doing. If your friends are doing law, if they're doing vacation schemes, if they're getting sort of accepted on applications, just to sort of be quite focused on yourself, because ultimately you're sort of only really in competition, not in competition with yourself, but you're not in competition with anybody else. You're on a journey and it's going to happen when it's going to happen, and I'm sure it will for a lot of you. I almost want to say be a bit more original in my applications. I think sometimes I felt like I had to sound a certain way or say the right things, be like, oh, I saw this deal, I saw that deal, because it was a really big deal. But actually, if there's a deal that's sort of worth, plucking a number out of the air, €1 billion, and there's one that's worth £10 million, but the one that's £10 million really speaks to you and you're really interested in that, choose that. You might not think it's as flash and it's sort of as glamorous, but if you can show a real interest, that's going to come across when you know, people like Kieran and Isabella are reading your applications. So yeah, I think be confident in your own abilities. And also I think the last point is, obviously you're going to be applying to multiple law firms. Try not to take the sort of rejections personally, because at the end of the day, you know, sometimes you get sort of 2,000, 3,000 applicants for what sort of 10 positions. You know, try and sort of, if you do get feedback, take the feedback on and deploy it when you do applications in the future, but don't sort of get really down, because you know what, like eventually if you sort of keep applying, you keep working hard, I'm sure you're going to end up with the result that you want.
Amazing. Thank you, Will, and thank you, Alex. Some great advice there. So thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We look forward to hopefully seeing some applications in the near future, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks all.
Thanks.
I just wanted to take a moment to give a final thank you to the Mayor Brown representatives who joined us today, as well as everyone who registered and attended the webinar. We hope you found today's webinar insightful and engaging. If you're interested in exploring opportunities at Mayor Brown further, please visit their profile on our Target Jobs website. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.